Assalamu Thank you all for your patience and for the delay, for dealing with the delay, and forgive me for that. Start inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, Lord of the worlds. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. We intend to learn and to teach, to remind and be reminded, to benefit and be benefited, to improve and be improved, and to encourage holding fast to the book of God in the way of his messenger, and to call unto guidance and to direct towards good, hoping for the countenance of God and his pleasure and his proximity and his reward. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen. So it's alhamdulillah, it's nice to be with everyone. It's been a while. Forgive me for that. And the assignment that we had from, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Let me find my person. There you are.
Was to become aware of what is the fadil, the thing that sparks curiosity in you to distract you, the door for shaitan. Make a spiritual goal to add to your daily regimen and figure out what the distraction is.
Okay. So you don't have to share the reflection on what is the distraction. No one needs to share that. That's between you and Allah. But the question for us in terms of your reflection on realizing that, what was it like to realize that's one of the doors that you were being sort of pulled away from? And how was that process of awareness, of building awareness around that distraction? And again, you don't need to say what the distraction is, but just the process of becoming aware of it. What was that like? And if anyone has any reflections from the assignment itself. Mm-hmm.
First,
Mm-hmm.
so then it's just so
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As someone who also, that I was able to do the assignment, was also surprised. I was surprised. So it's that's what one of my responses to this assignment was like, oh wow, okay. But alhamdulillah, for myself, I think the realization was empowering as well. So it will be connected to today's tafsir. It's very connected to today's tafsir. But any other thoughts about the assignment?
That was annoying.
It was annoying.
Very annoying.
Yeah.
Letting comment.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was trying to figure out, is this a distraction or just from what? I'm trying to figure out what to do.
Mm.
Sometimes it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. That is very true. Did you guys understand what was just mentioned in terms of sometimes a person thinks that is this a distraction or is it from Allah? Is it a sign? You know, is this what you should be doing instead? Or is it just making you busy with a lesser priority? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that was waste time, like don't fulfill my potential.
Mm-hmm.
Because they go through it, yeah, like so much is lost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like gaining knowledge, just like doing something beneficial
Mm-hmm.
that time spent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I think that's why for me it was also empowering, was because there's a realization that there's actually more time in our day than we thought there was. And then we also have greater capacity than we thought we had. And so, so it's a blessing to just realize there's space, you know, people who are very like, think I'm someone, unfortunately, I was under the delusion that I was too busy for certain things. And I was like, no, I'm not actually too busy for this. I'm genuinely not too busy for this, you know? And so, so alhamdulillah, that was one of the things I enjoyed personally. Any other thoughts from the assignment? Did anyone, I want to say, did anyone after realizing it get into you don't have to raise your hand, I'm just posing it rhetorically. Did anyone after realizing it get into what is it? A state where you're beating yourself up? Right? Where you're just like, this is the Afghan hand. You recognize it, right? You're like, what are you doing? So yeah. So but the thing is, again, as someone who understands this very well, alhamdulillah, like it's just it's this idea of crying over spilled milk. It doesn't clean up the milk, right? So it actually doesn't help us to just shift gears. But it can be a cycle, and it's one of the reasons why I think like we evade self-awareness is because if you become aware of something and you are too hard on yourself, then you don't actually want to become aware of things because you're going to be too hard. So so being gentle with ourselves, as we had taken in one of our previous classes, like don't insult yourself, don't say, your inner voice should not say things, and if you hear it saying things, then push it back and be gentle with yourself instead. So if your inner voice is saying, you idiot, why'd you do that? Then you need to pick that person back up and instead say something that you would say to your sister or to your brother, which is, that's okay. That's fine. We're gonna try again. Yeah. So okay. It's connected since last 2 weeks assignment was really about awareness. The assignment for this week is really related to the allegorical commentary of Imam Ibn Ajiba. So let me pull that up for everyone. Oh, and we have more here. So here we have a reflection. I have been trying to get back to memorizing surahs bit by bit slowly, but have not been able to make a habit out of it. I realize the distraction is simply me feeling like my brain is too exhausted to be able to memorize. So I just put it off each day without even trying, even though I know I can give it at least 5 minutes each day, like I used to before. And it did give me results. So yeah, so that's one of the other things about whatever the goal is, always choose what's accessible and easy. And if you choose something accessible and easy, you will actually do more than that. But just in your head, it should be something small, because that's one of the things that the shaitan has a harder time convincing you, for example, that he may tell you, you don't have the energy to read a whole juz of Quran, but he can't really say that with 3 pages or a page, you know, or half a page, you know. So making something really in your mind initially small, and then once you get to it, if you do more, that's fine. But let the goal initially be what's easiest for us. And you'll see that that will open up more and more and more. Inshallah. Okay, so let me pull up the verses. So the verses from last week or last 2 weeks was So when they have fulfilled their term, take them back in an honorable way, or separate from them in an honorable way, and call 2 just persons among yourselves to witness and uphold the testimony for God. By this is exhorted whosoever believes in God and the last day, and whosoever reverences God, he will appoint a way out for him, and he will provide for him whence he reckons not, and whosoever trusts in God, he suffices him. Truly, God fulfills his command. God has indeed set a measure for all things. So the allegorical commentary really starts from the last clause of the second verse, which is وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا, and whoever reverences God, he will appoint a way out for him. So Imam Ibn Ajiba, he says that, and whoever has taqwa of Allah has this, and he says kamila, so like a complete God consciousness, he will make for them, for every problem, doubt, and confusing matter, a way out. all the problems that people have in deen and dunya is dissolved for them. They are granted the rizq of knowledge and secrets and deeper knowing, that which doesn't occur to the mind, and from where they could never imagine without learning or studying. And this was actually something I remember learning really early on, is whoever practices what they know, Allah will teach them what they don't know. They will learn, Allah will grant them the knowledge of what they don't know. Simply practice what you know. And that's why, subhanAllah, sometimes you meet people who are not particularly they haven't ever gone into like a formal, Islamic university or anything like that, but they're really wonderful, good people who did what they knew, and they're so amazing. They're so incredible. And like you experience the goodness in them. And it's it's that realization that goodness is in a state of being. The practice of goodness is ontology, right? Like it's a state of being. The seeking of knowledge is epistemology, right? It's connected to epistemology. Like, where are you getting it from? I'm going to use Shaykh Fuad's terms today. Ontologically speaking. Someone who practices what they know, Allah will open for them doors of knowledge. And then their doors of epistemology will be not what they expected. Again, and he says, without learning or studying. So, I would always hear this, from relatives and family members. They'd be like, okay, this person was a family member who passed away. And they would say, like, he didn't know a whole lot, but whatever he knew, he did. And so, people receive so much good from that person who was not a scholar and not anyone, but they were very charitable. They were very kind. They never said a word to hurt anyone. The little that they knew, they practiced. And so they became big, in the hearts of people. And alhamdulillah, that's, especially when people pass away, sometimes we find out more and more stories about these people. And may Allah make us of those who, when we pass away, good is remembered and not the other stuff, not anything else. Says Imam al-Qushayri said, if a servant is true in their taqwa, then he or she is removed from what busies them. He says, like a hair is pulled out from dough, nothing is attached to them. He grants them his divine care and help, and he enters them into his protective shelter and removes the distractions from his or her heart, and removes this person from self-direction and singles them out, or pulls them out of all of their busyness. I mean, this is my bad translation, but all the things that busy them. And Allah suffices them in every matter, and He moves them to witnessing the decree of His ordainments. So rather than being someone who is themselves busy with everything, Allah takes them out of that state of I'm so busy, into a state of they are witnessing what God is doing with them. Right? They are in a. It doesn't mean that they're not doing anything, but they perceive what they do to be what they're receiving from God. And they're in this idea of he uses both the word qada and taqdeer. Taqdeer has an indication of like God's measurements, and qada is a decree that cannot be changed. So he's watching, or she's watching, that which is being apportioned by God. And they're able to do this because they've already surrendered to Him. They've already accepted Him as being in charge, and Him as moving them, and Him as moving everything else in the world. So Shaykh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadili, he said, rahmatullah alayh, he says regarding this, that that it needs to be outward and inward. So the outward in that is that the person is purified or free from acts of disobedience or engaging in the haram, as well as the inward, which is from sins and false claims and entitlements. And so I think this is really interesting. It's not enough just to do good deeds, outward good deeds, and abstain from outward bad deeds. The inner deeds are also equally important. And he brings up false claims. So as sort of like the block, this is a major block for the person in their spiritual path. A false claim is attributing, an example of a false claim is attributing a good we do to ourselves. So, you know, so if let's say you work hard and you're at a job and you're working really hard and you feel unappreciated, right? Now it's one thing, like on a level of outward justice, it's important that you're always in a place that compensates you properly, appreciation, whatever. But if inwardly you actually feel like I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, in that is a false claim. Because in reality, it's like Allah allowed you to do this and He granted you this and He granted you this. And, you know, so it doesn't mean that you didn't do it. You did do it. But to feel like that the difference is, okay, God allowed me to do this versus I did this with a capital I, you know. So there's an entitlement in that. Some of our resentment can come from these places because we don't realize this, like this I that should be a lowercase that whispers has become a roaring giant. And so he says, one who purifies their outward from disobedience and haram actions, but they blocked their horizon with false claims. And he says, selfishly managing and selecting things for themselves. So here, that word in Arabic, it's hard to translate into English. It's tadbir, and it's self-direction, but it's also rooted in the self. It's like selfish self-direction, right? So you're like constantly like looking out for all of these interests in a way where you feel like if you don't do that, then things are going to, you're going to be harmed. And there's no trust in God in being that sort of, I don't want to say greedy for management. Kind of like, I mean, I want to compare it to like a used car salesman. Right? A used car salesman, it's like always looking at the angle. What angle can I use to like, you know, to get the best out of this thing for myself, right? So this is one of the signs of the one whose inward is not purified, is that's kind of how they deal with the world and how they deal with people in general, is they're like vying for whatever is going to serve their personal interests in that way. He says, selfishly managing and selecting things for themselves. He says their goodness is not fully achieved because of these inner evils, and so they don't enter into the meaning of this ayah. So this verse, and again, this is the allegorical meaning of the verse, what is being described is a full, everyone has taqwa, every believer has a measure of taqwa, of God consciousness. But Imam Ibn Ajib was talking about someone who has it in a very complete form, right? So then that person who has it in a very complete form is given special gifts. They're taken out of every difficulty, or they're given an out from every problem of this world and also the problems of the next world. And they're given knowledge, they're given a sustenance from where they can't imagine, from not from their own efforts, not from their own studying, but something that is a gift that Allah grants them. And so he says, so someone who does this, they don't get those things, except he says for the one, meaning again, there are people who will still be gifted what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give someone who has complete taqwa, which is the one who is turned by the winds of qadr, however they are turned. So now Imam Ibn Ajib starts to describe who is this person who has so lovingly surrendered, who has given up their self-management, who has accepted they're content with God, right? Like what's the way that we can like recognize this person? And he says, this person who's turned by the winds of the divine decree, however they are turned, and they are not selfishly attached to anything. They are the ones that Allah says about them in Surah As-Sajdah, تَتَجَافَى جُنُوبِهِمْ عَنِ الْمَضَاجِعِ. So here, this verse in the Qur'an Surah As-Sajdah, where this clause says, their sides forsake their beds. And you see, he says, you see that they have forbidden. Or he says, do you not see? He has prevented their sides from their mattresses of sleep. And he has left their hearts from resting or finding tranquility in anyone but him. Rather, he has elevated their hearts above everything, and nothing interferes with or enters upon their secrets. He says, understand this meaning. Their sides forsake the beds of selfish choosing and disputing over the decree. Like having, they say like al-i'tirad. Al-i'tirad is to be like, but, you know, like where God decrees something and someone says, but towards God's decree. So they don't have this in their hearts. But here also Imam Ibn Ajib is describing this as something that God again has granted them. Like, so it's part of it is their effort, but part of it is at some point Allah provides them with protection. And he says, their sides forsake their beds of selfish choosing and disputing over the decree. They make dua to their Lord with khawf and tama. But their khawf is their cutting themselves off from other than him. That's the example of their khawf, of their fear. Meaning their fear of God. And here it's not the other roots, like khawf actually is fear, right? But it's more like they're afraid of being attached to anyone else but God, out of their like immense love for him. So they cut their hearts off from anyone other than him, except if it's through him, right? So it doesn't mean this person doesn't love their mother or their spouse or their kids, but they learn to love for God and through God and with God, right? So, and this is a representation of their fear. And he says, with love for the divine, and they are made to be attached and clinging to him. And here the tama is like usually a reference to greed, but it's not greed. It's like they need God more than anything else. There's a feeling or an emotion that you have when you think of the word greed. Can anyone be greedy for God? Right? Can you apply that to God? It's not a good translation, but it's kind of like a similar feeling. Like it's this. That's where their heart is. And then God gives them this, all right, so that again their hearts are undistracted with God. They don't sleep, they can't sleep because they spend that time with him. And he says, and here he's talking about not just physical sleep, but they don't sleep in like the bed here is that it's a metaphor for other people. It's finding rest or comfort in other than God. And so they don't sleep in those places. They take their rest with God. And then someone who's given all this, they spend from this rizq, right? From this sustenance, that which we have given them. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ, right? That and Allah will provide for them from whence this person reckons not. And he quotes now from a Shafi'i fiqh book, Al-Hashiyah Al-Fasiyah, and he says that Allah grants him sustenance, which there is no difficulty. It's interesting, it's a fiqh book, but unless I'm quoting the wrong, unless this is the same title for another book, but he says in Al-Hashiyah Al-Fasiyah, Allah grants this person a sustenance from where there is no difficulty in acquiring it. And there were clothing without waiting. And there is no self-examining of the nafs. And there is no tiredness or exhaustion. So matters will be revealed to their intuition from the unseen that would suffice them from asking. And whoever knows Allah, they know his complete power and his all-encompassing knowledge of their actions down to the mustard seed. So they leave the reins of choice and decision to Allah. So he suffices them in every instance of this life and the next. And he is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. And one of the words that was used was like, basically that Allah subsists them. And I don't understand how to fully put that meaning together, but they basically subsist through God, or they exist through his will. And Sahel said, taqwa is abandoning the claim to effort or strength. Like God consciousness is abandoning the personal claim to effort or strength. So this is kind of like, subhanAllah, I just read this actually. The statement, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, right? There's no strength, or there's no effort or strength except by Allah. So the person doesn't see, again, I tried so hard, I did so much, right? They see, my effort, my ability to do something came to me from God. If a person, and he's going to talk about this, Imam al-Qushayri, he said about وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ, that whoever puts their trust in God, then he is the one who suffices them. If something is already decreed to happen, so inna Allah balighu amri, let me just make sure. Truly God fulfills his command. So he says, if something is already decreed to happen, without a doubt it will happen. And whether a person has tawakkul, the destined situation is going to happen. It's not going to change and it will not be delayed. If a person doesn't have tawakkul, again, that which is destined is going to happen. It will not change. It will not be delayed. But the mutawakkil, the one who has this trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's in their heart, they don't hate that which comes to it because they had trust in God. And this is, he says, this is from the most valuable blessings. And another place he said that tawakkul is witnessing yourself outside of divine strength, but carried with it. So you don't have your own strength, right? You see yourself outside of that, but you're carried by divine strength. And he says that you see it flowing upon you. You see flowing upon you the rules of destiny. Again, without self-direction from you, or you're questioning it. So the way of the servant is, and again, this translation is terrible. One day someone should translate this entire thing so much nicer. But for now, he says the way of the servant is inactivity and contentment without inquiring about the decree. So I'm going to go back to the Arabic. It's basically, it's more passive than active. It doesn't mean that the person isn't doing a lot. Because you look at Sirah, these companions had tawakkul. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had tawakkul. They did so much, right? But the difference is receiving the deed from God and not doing it in a way of self-direction. And people are at different levels when it comes to this, right? So there are people who can, when you were saying earlier, like, is this from God or is this from my nafs? There are people who know when they're being directed by God. And so they move in that direction. And they know when something, because of spiritual practice, they know that something else is a distraction and a delusion, and they don't move at all. And so the general rule is you don't do it unless you're certain there's a benefit. When you have confusion and doubt. If something is 50-50, where you think the benefit and the harm are going to be equal, you still don't do it. So the default is actually don't do it unless there's a clear benefit, right? So that's the passive that we're talking about. It's inactivity. But if there's benefit, then yes, and there's possibility, then you move in that direction. So it says, and contentment without inquiring about it. So when the decree comes, even whether it's good or bad, or what something you like or don't like, contentment means that you're not questioning God, but why did you do this, right? And again, these are stations. We're talking about someone who has this complete taqwa. We're not talking, so, and why would, like, the reason it's important to describe this is simply to know, one, that it's possible. Two, that there are human beings who are actually like this, that they attain these like sort of spiritual places where they could look upon what was happening in the world and be connected to God. And in times when they were supposed to move, they moved, and they moved with strength. And other times when they weren't supposed to move, you couldn't push them because they were not going to be deluded by that moment. So I'll pause here and be like, just on a very practical level, do you guys want to know one of the times where it's very easy to be deluded? Elections. It could be any organization, any election. It's like, it's very easy for everybody to be like, I should be the president, like it's a very, I can do so much good, I can do all these things, right? And that's where a person can get to it, because they think in their mind, oh, it's so much good. But if you have this need to hold a title and a position in order to do the good, can't you do most of that good without the position or title? Couldn't you do it without? Yeah, actually you can. We can. And in so many institutions, coming in as a servant volunteer, you can do so much more good than holding a title. Titles usually count against us. If you hold it, you'll be asked about titles on Yawm al-Qiyamah. But if you don't hold a title and you do something, you do all that good, then it's all for you. There's nothing against you, right? It's literally like, it's all sadaqah. He says, and in the hadith in Muslim, this falls under, when it comes to inquiring about like the divine decree, he says this falls under "A'udhu billahi min ilmin la yanfa," knowledge without benefit. So one of the things that a person can fall into when they're trying to practice like trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having tawakkul is, and he's talking about it here. And alhamdulillah, I don't necessarily think that like this, I don't think American Muslims are not in this category, but he says that they shouldn't be concerned with spiritual stations and miracles and unveilings, but rather simply be content with Allah. And Allah is not pleased with people who are getting busy with those things, right? Like, so as a person is trying to do better, they shouldn't be thinking about, okay, am I in like this maqam or that maqam? And they shouldn't be thinking about that. It's not why we do what we do. What we should be thinking about, if it's going to be thought, is what does Allah love? How do I get closer to him? They shouldn't be thinking about miracles, right? So do miracles happen? Do people have true dreams? Yes, the Prophet ﷺ said that true dreams are going to be one of the remaining forms of prophethood that exists in the world. And you can enjoy a miracle. Like if you see a miracle, you enjoy it, that's fine. But like to be obsessed with it, and that's a different thing. And so, because then it's about the miracle, it's not about God, right? It's about a station, it's not about God, right? A station is a form of like, what is it called? It can in the ego, it can be a position or a title not very unsimilar to like president or vice president, So it's not about climbing a particular kind of ladder in that way, but it is about drawing closer to God. And so, or unveilings. Like I just had, subhanAllah, today someone called in to my, my outside of office hours with something. And I'm like, wow, that's an unveiling. You just experienced an unveiling. And I don't doubt this person for a second at all. And subhanAllah, but to become, and alhamdulillah, this wasn't the case with a person at all, mashallah, but it's easy to become obsessed with those things and to like try to look for the next one and whatever it is. And the problem with that is if someone does do that, shaitan knows they have a door. And so they'll start to experience things thinking it's coming from some angelic source, and it's actually not an angelic source. So, so yeah, these are things that actually like they're tangents, and they're ways that we get pulled off from the straight path to God. And so they say the only karama, the only miracle we should ever be praying for is karamat al-istiqamah, just to remain on the straight path. And the scholars also say that is the greatest of all miracles. These other ones are miracles that God is giving you. Istiqamah is one that, you're asking God to preserve you in your path to him. He says, but rather be content with Allah, and Allah, I mentioned that. He says, Allah seeks from us as-sukun, to have tranquility with him in his remembrance. And sufficiency is from the one who suffices us. So when we think about like what we need, there's no way that we can get what's sufficient for me, whatever my situation is, outside of the one who actually suffices me, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He brings it about as he wills, however he wills. And so tawakkul is that which suffices you from all the rest of even the other spiritual stations. The one who has tawakkul, like true trust in God, this is a big statement. If a person truly gives themselves over to God, right? This idea, وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, I turn my entire affair over to God. And they do this not just with words, but like they really internalize this. He says this actually suffices them from all the other stations. And then he says, and then Allah says with his gentleness, he will carry out his command. Inna Allaha balighu amrihi. Again, whether a person has tawakkul or not, except that for the one who had tawakkul, then Allah will be sufficient for them, and he will suffice every concern of theirs from this life and the next. And the one who did not have tawakkul will not have their portion increased. He says they will not have their portion increased by the wing of a mosquito, just as their risk will not be decreased by a mustard seed. Right? So it's not like they're not going to be helped or hurt. However, the one with tawakkul will have their guidance increased with more guidance. So what tawakkul brings about is it doesn't change sort of like the outward decree that's meant to come down. But what it does do is it gives you these inward things, these inward gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the other one does not get. He says, and this person will be raised in the station of certainty, commensurate with the amount of their taqwa. And he will grant them honor from his honor. Allah will grant them izzah. I'll pause here. In situations of where a person puts their trust in God and God grants them honor from his honor, right? There are so many times when people are in tribulation and there's all these ways that they could maybe find a way out of it, but it would be committing something that's, that God would not be pleased with, right? And this person would rather essentially not do those things. They'd rather stay true to what Allah is pleased with. And so they're granted not just a way out, but they're also granted honor in that. There's an esteem that's given that people will have for them because their trust is in God. And so, I mean, with like the younger kids, for example, at Majlis on Sunday, we're talking about peer pressure, right? And doing the right thing, everyone else is doing the wrong thing, and how you do the right thing at school, especially like nice behavior versus bad behavior. And Allah's always watching us and all of that. And so, so one of the things that we talked about is that even if other kids don't like that you didn't follow what they did, if you're doing what you're doing for the sake of Allah, like deep down, these other kids are going to respect you because they know they can't control you, that you're moved by something else. This is across the board, whether it's at work, whether it's whatever capacities like that we're out in the world. It could be with our family, relatives, wherever it is. The person who really puts their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will grant them honor from his honor. And the one who did not have tawakkul, their certainty will decrease, their exhaustion and tiredness will increase, and their worries will increase, and their heart will be tattered and torn, and their thoughts scattered. Okay, so before anyone gets really sad, because they felt exhausted, tired, they worried, and their heart felt tattered and torn. Their thoughts were scattered. This does not mean you're a bad person. Okay, like if you find yourself going through these things, it doesn't mean you're bad. It means though that there's like this superpower you have that you have yet to tap into, and everyone has it. Like everyone has this, like this ability to put trust in God, and it is a practice, and you can't like make this muscle strong without practice. So that's why he says, like the certainty is this person's yaqeen increases commensurate with their amount of God consciousness. So as a person increases in God consciousness, awareness of God, then their trust in God will also increase. Their certainty in God, their good opinion of God will increase. Remembrance of God helps all of this. It's like the seed that will like powers, or the fuel that powers the whole machine. All the cogs will start working, everything starts running. And so, so if you feel, exhausted, tired, worried, tattered and torn, thoughts are scattered, don't I want to say, don't take this as a moment to berate yourself. Not at all. Take this as a moment as like, this is, God shows us how to find our way back to him through sometimes moments like this, and also how to use this dormant muscle that we have inside of ourselves, this dormant spiritual muscle that we have inside of ourselves. And through these situations where now it's like we have to find it, right? We have to actually find that muscle so we can so that we can experience the relief that we need. And so he says, but for the mutawakkil, it becomes incumbent to purify. He's saying, it's like Allah is saying this about the mutawakkil, the one who puts their trust in him. He says it's like yajib, and yajib, Allah is talking about like what it becomes, I don't say an obligation on him, but like he has made this something that he must do for the one who puts their trust in him, like it's his promise. Then he will purify this person from their sins, and Allah will cast upon this person contentment and his love in various stations. Excuse me. And he guarantees it for the one who was true in their trust in him. And he also grants them his divine protection. He gives it to one who makes excellent their loving surrender to him. So it's not just like surrender, but like they make excellent that loving surrender. It's a process. And he says, except that the choice and the knowledge of, I mean, that some of this stuff is really hard to translate, but the istitar is the word that's used. So it's like a protection, it's a form of protection that comes from God, in which they're veiled from anything that's going to harm them, spiritually or physically. They're protected by him. And this is through his sufficiency and his wiqaya. And wiqaya is like a shield. Like God has, it's a protection in which a person is almost like in a force field, right? So he gives this person something like that, and his kifaya, his sufficiency. He causes that in what he wills, however he wills, and whenever he wills, from matters of dunya and akhirah, from where the servant knows and doesn't know, because the servant is the one who the rules or the commands flow upon them in both worlds. And the impoverished one is in need of the mercy and gentleness of God in both places. So this was the translation, and it was a choppy translation. Forgive me for the parts that did not flow easily. But the theme that I wanted us to look at for ourselves in terms of like practicing what is being said here at whatever capacity we have is to practice this muscle of trusting in God and having a sense of relief in that. So, so what we heard was this idea of inactivity, right? Or a passive receiving from God. But that's not, suluk is actually making choices about coming closer to God, right? So there's both. And in the moment of doing the good, we are making the choices. In the moment of looking back on the good, he has made those choices. Does that make sense? There's a particular activity that I want to do with what everyone did in the previous assignment. So if everyone can take out like paper, I'm gonna or use their phone. I'm gonna give you like 4 questions, not even questions. They're just like points. Okay. So there's points about how do you create a good habit? How do you get rid of a negative habit, right? Here we're intentionally choosing something that has clear benefit in it, right? So this is good, right? And we had said in the previous assignment, choose something small, easy, doable, so as what it is. And then we reflected on what was that distraction that took us away from it. So there's 4 points that make something that help us to do the good things that we want to try to do. Okay. As Sheikh Walid always says this, he says, you don't leave the good that you're trying to do or the bad that you're trying to stay away from as something that like totally left to willpower. You don't like rely only on willpower. You do things in your environment that makes the good easy, that makes the whatever you're trying to avoid like hard to do. And it's going to be haraj. It's going to be like, put the dessert somewhere so high you need to climb a ladder to go and get it. You're not going to like, no, that's okay, I won't get it. So make the bad like that. Yes, I know I always make dieting analogies, but so for the good one, for the good thing, make it obvious. That's the first one. So the first word is Q, C-U-E. Make it obvious. That's what you're going to try to do with whatever it is that you want to include or add into your life. Another way that you can think about make it obvious, make it easily visible to you, easily seen, right? Put something out in your house. If you're trying to read more Qur'an, maybe you're going to put the Qur'an stand with your Qur'an in the middle of the living room. So you have to pass by it every time, open, so it's like right there, make it obvious. And then the second thing is to make it attractive. Here, you're actually practicing this nasiha of, I would say like this is something that I think Sheikh Muhammad mentioned about how we deal with the nafs, is he's like, if you think about like milking a cow, right? You have to gently milk the cow to get the milk out. But if you're trying to get the milk out and you are like, I'm going to chop off the udders, you're not going to get any milk, and the poor cow is just going to be bleeding all over the place. So we can't do that to ourselves. You don't even do this to you don't kill your ego this way. You're only going to destroy yourself, right? Rather, you're trying to milk things out of the ego, right? And so gently. And so, so you work with where you're at in order to do this. And so the second aspect of it is make it attractive. Make it something that might appeal to that part of yourself. Make this spiritual good something that appeals to your lower nafs. Does that make sense? Not in a lower nafs, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be, I'm not talking about some kind of sin, obviously, but just something like, for example, like with little kids when they're potty trained, you give them a little piece of candy. You know what I mean? Because this candy reinforces the behavior of what you want. So for us, right, what's that small little goodie that you can put next to this thing that's gonna get you to keep coming back and that you can look forward to? We're allowed to do this. We're allowed to literally do this with ourselves to get us to a better place. So make it attractive. The next one is to make it easy, right? So only commit to a small amount that when you think about it, you think I can easily do that, right? Like, right, maybe right now you're at 0, and then you think of the next thing. It has to be so easy that you think about it and you're like, this is not hard. This is not even a little bit challenging. And like I said, one of the benefits of doing it like that is that you will usually do more. Once you keep this, you're going to do more than that. You're going to increase it. But if you shoot to the point where here again, you're dealing with the nafs. So again, you're pulling the milk out. You're not chopping anything. And so it's an amount that you're like, I can do this right now. You're not going to be overwhelmed. Okay, and the last one is similar to the second one, which is to make it satisfying. Like there should be some kind of reward that's related to this. So let's say, for example, one of the ways that you're going to make something attractive to do, let's say you want to do a particular dhikr, right? You might buy a very special bukhur and put it next to, like, set up that space, make it look pretty, put some lights around, like tea candles, whatever it is, make it pretty for sisters and make it elegant for brothers. I don't know. And get a scent in there that you're like, once I light this, I'm going to already be in a better mood, right? And that's the way you're going to make it attractive. And then after you're done with that, okay, what's the reward? I've heard Ansa Tamra say this, and she's like, for someone who wants to, she's like, the tahajjud is a beautiful time. You get up, you make your coffee, and I'm like, oh, you enjoy that coffee. I know that early morning coffee, like that's how she's making the act of tahajjud an extra ibadah at that time. She's going to make a nice cup of coffee first and then get into it. So maybe you're going to do that. Maybe there's going to be a reward at the end, which is like that. But don't, again, choose rewards that you won't regret. Like, don't choose something that then you have to like get rid of that. Don't make, you know what I mean? So be careful. Don't be like, every time I do this, I'm going to go shopping on Amazon, you know. But something that, like, you know, but it's a reward. Like, it's going to be, yeah.
It's a question of what you said before. You said when you do a good action, like you have a choice to do good action, but if you remember it, you repent. What does that mean?
Meaning, once you remember the good, just you attribute the good of that action as something he gave you.
That you remind me.
Yeah, that he's the one who gave that to you, right? So like, he's the one who blessed you with that good deed. Before you do it, you're going to try. This is your thing that you need to try to do. After it's done, it came to you from him. Yeah, it was a gift from him. Yeah. Which he can take away at any time. And subhanAllah, like this is where judgment and all of these things, like on a spiritual level, or there's always advices about never look down on people committing different kinds of sins, because it's God's protection of you that you're not doing that. If you remove that protection, you'd be doing the same thing, you know. So this concept that like the good that we do can be taken away. This other person that you're looking down on could be 1,000 times better than you. You know what I mean? Like we don't want to ever feel again with that hidden claim within ourselves that I don't do that. You know, it's more like, alhamdulillah, although you protected me from this, like, you know, we were seeking the continuation of that protection. Now, Did everyone put that down? Did you guys not just write down the things, but did you guys like put next to it what your personal like choices for those things? If you guys can just take a few seconds and put that in as well.
What's the difference between making it attractive and being satisfying?
So make it attractive is it's what pulls you in to do it. Make it satisfying is there's a reward afterwards. Yeah. So this is what gets you in the door. This is what afterwards you're like, look forward to it. So you're going to complete it because you're going to have this after. Yeah.
So we're trying to just start a habit to that
This is here we're looking at spiritual habits, any kind of simple like additional spiritual good deed that we want to do, include in our lives. It could be, like I said, that give the easy one, which is like, it could be a person wants to read more Qur'an. It could be a person wants to do dhikr. It could be a person wants to wake up a little bit before Fajr and make dua, whatever it is. Like it could, whatever act of worship you feel called to, that's in addition to what you already do. But again, small and measure, like small, and it's not overwhelming to you. You're choosing something that, and something that you want to do consistently, like add this bit into your life in a more permanent way. Now, as you guys are writing this down, I'm just going to comment because you're like, we just talked a lot about trust in God, and now we're putting in all this effort. How are the two related, right? And so, so one of my teachers, I remember asking him about this in terms of building our capacities, and like if there's a way in which we make choices to do better, right? All of us can do that in whatever ways that we intend to. And then we try, but we seek the success of those things, whatever it is that we're intending, from God. And we may succeed sometimes in this effort, and we may sometimes like not be able to do it. But if we continue to go back and rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for whatever it is we're trying to do, and the reliance, this is like a practice in reliance, because you're tying the camel and having tawakkul at the same time. But this is tying the camel. Right, so tying the camel, like tawakkul is not, God, I want to be spiritually elevated. Just take me from where I am and like put me in these places where Imam Abdaji was talking. No, like that's not. We have to do whatever we can, any human effort to take steps towards Him. But while we're taking those steps, not to put all of the reliance on ourselves, not to, as much as we can, to actually put the reliance in Him. So we're going to do the outward aspect. We're going to make it attractive. We're going to make it rewarding. We're going to make it obvious and visible. We're going to make that good deeds consistent and small, so that we're not overwhelmed when we think about it. So it's really accessible. And again, my teachers always say, start with what's easiest. Whenever I ask, what do I do next? Start with what's easiest. And I'm like, Afghans, we always want someone to tell us to do something impossible. We feel the need for someone to tell us to do something impossible. But then they're like, no, start with what's easiest. Extremism runs deep. So that's for building the good. Now, what's in the spiritual path? What's more important, doing something good or omitting something negative? Omitting something negative, yeah. So I started with this because this is hopefully to get us motivated, but the same thing that we can do to, in terms of doing a good deed, we can actually apply this to omitting something negative. If everyone can think of something negative they're trying to omit from their lives, anything negative. Could be something in speech you don't want to do anymore. It could be something, anything, just anything that you're like, what? It's not about halal and haram. It's about, I just don't want to do that. If I have a choice, I'd rather be doing this other good deed than be doing this other like nonsense thing. Yeah. Maybe it's I don't want to be scrolling on social media for 20 minutes randomly. That could be it. You know what I mean? So in order to get rid of something that's bad, subhanAllah, they say make it invisible. So whatever that bad is, that thing that bad habit is, make that bad habit invisible. like put all the dessert behind the cupboard, close the cupboards, don't leave it out on countertops. You don't need to smell it. You don't need to see it. Or take your phone when you come home from work and stick it in a box that's by the door so that you don't actually physically see your phone. Unless you might like schedule times throughout the day where you can go back to it if you feel like this is, too distracting. So whatever that bad is, think about a way to make it invisible. Then the second thing is to think about a way to make it unattractive. So, yeah. And here, all you have to do to make something unattractive is you don't have to actually like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something like, I'm going to use the dessert analogy again, but like take the chocolate cake and put a bunch of towels over it or something to make it attractive. No, like that's not it. It's actually here they're saying it's good to associate it with an automatic like negative thing, whatever that is. So whatever that deed is, maybe associate it in your mind mentally with like the worst consequence of indulging in that. What is the worst part? Like imagine what that is.
Like backbiting, eating flesh.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Backbiting, eating flesh. So like try to it can literally just be developing the imaginative picture of that very, very clearly in your mind, in your mind's eye. Then make it difficult, right? So what was normally easy for you to do, there's different ways that we can make it difficult. If there's certain sins, for example, backbiting, if it's only with like certain people that it comes up, maybe you're gonna have to limit your relationship with them for a while until you're not used to that in your system. Or it could be that, you schedule other things in your life so that doing this other bad deed is gonna become very difficult to do. I remember I had a teacher in Egypt who said, when they travel, they make sure to never stay by themselves anywhere. And they said, I remember thinking like, why? And they said, because they said they think they haven't, alhamdulillah, they haven't done anything bad, but they just feel like that like, in a Muslim country with masajid and family and relatives, there's so much like community, there's so much Islam all around you. So when they're going to like a country that doesn't have Muslims, they're afraid of the idea that there's not someone next to them that's like their Muslim brother, or a family member, someone that's like their reminder of, and this is not someone this is a very pious person. So they try never to stay by themselves. They try to always have a Muslim roommate wherever they go. Not because they sin in any kind of a blatant way, but just because they know that extra person for them is something that encourages them. Again, it would make certain kinds of sins difficult. If you have righteous friends, certain kinds of sins are going to become difficult. And then the last one is make it unsatisfying. So yes, you can give yourself a punishment, but you can call it like a consequence. It doesn't have to be, it could be like, okay, if you do this, then you have to do 10 push-ups, 50 laps around the block, but you can give yourself something that's not painful or bad, but like a consequence that just makes it unsatisfying. Like, no, I don't want to do that again. Okay, thank you guys for indulging me in this activity. I will be very interested to see how next week's reflections go. But this is really, really, really an opportunity for us to practice tawakkul. And I feel like you're going to learn a lot, inshallah. You're going to learn a lot about how Allah gives you things if you try, and from places you didn't expect, and you just keep trying. Like, inshallah, I hope that this will be a happy exercise and assignment that allows all of us to tap deeper into this gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he tells us, like, if you put your trust in me, right, I'm going to find a way out for you for everything. If you put your trust in me, he says he'll make things easy for us. We didn't actually have time to get to this, to the tafsir for today, which I had prepared. But I'll just say this one point. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the 4th verse, at the end of it, he says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِهِ يُسْرًا. And whoever reverences God, he will appoint ease for his affair. So just, again, putting your trust in God, whatever your assignment is that you're trying to do or stay away from, Allah will make it easy if we put our trust in him, and also if we have taqwa of him, if we have this increased awareness for him. And then in the 5th verse, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يُكَفِّرْ عَنْهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِ وَيُعْظِمْ لَهُ أَجْرًا. And whoever reverences God, he will absolve him of his evil deeds and honor him with reward. So there's purification in this, like consciously practicing God consciousness, increasing in the good, removing whatever it is that's displeasing to him as much as we can. There's purification of not just like these deeds, but there's purification of sins in general. And Imam Ibn Ajibah, he says that our deeds are first made plentiful, and then those plentiful deeds are multiplied. So we're talking about like exponential good deeds for a conscious and deliberate practice of taqwa. It's more than just this habit. It's more than just, the habit is just a symbolic effort, but it's like, I'm trying to take steps of God consciousness towards my creator, or with my creator and for my creator. And that's what the assignment, inshallah, is about. And I'm going to close because I don't think we have time to get to verse 4 and 5 today. That's okay with everyone. There was like 4 pages of translation for the allegorical commentary. But next week, it won't be like that. Next week, we'll be able to get through a lot more, inshallah. There's some messages here. Yes, haris ala Allah, to be like sort of guarding their relationship with God. So there's a question here, can you go over the point about a default state of passivity again? So the default of when a thought comes to us of whether or not we should do something or not do something is it's actually inaction. It's actually inaction. We have to evaluate it first. Without evaluation, we don't do it, right? So if we evaluate the thing and we're like, this is clearly beneficial, then we do it, right? If we evaluate the thing and we're in doubt about it, and we say the good in it and the bad in it could be equal or the same, the pros and cons or the benefits and harms, then we actually abstain. We don't do it. Obviously, if the harms are greater than the benefits, then we don't do it. So the default is actually to not do. And then if we choose to do, we're like, this is crazy. If we evaluate the thing and we're in doubt about it, and we say the good in it and the bad in it could be equal or the same, the pros and cons or the benefits and harms, then we actually abstain. We don't do it. Obviously, if the harms are greater than the benefits, then we don't do it. So the default is actually to not do. Oh, and then if we to do, we're like, this is crazy. No, it's not my computer. All right. Let's see. If we evaluate the thing and we're in doubt about it, and we say the good in it and the bad in it. I'm gonna have to. Yeah. There we go. Sorry for that. Sorry for muting. I think that's Auntie Nahid too. So please forgive me, Auntie. So here's a question about how do we know if the sins we are committing are a punishment and misguiding for us by Allah? Sins that we don't repent for, right, we would get punished for. But if we're doing a sin and we're repenting every time that we commit the sin, then it's actually in the tafsir that I didn't get to cover, is that inna al-hasanat yudhibna sayyat. So when we do good, it wipes out the evil. So as long as a person is always repenting, we don't take human reality, which is to make mistakes and have shortcomings and have sins, as a sign of God's punishment. You know, Allah loves those who are repentant to Him. So how can you be repentant if you're not making mistakes and you don't have shortcomings, you don't have sins? So, okay, inshallah, just because of time, and I think we have to close up, we'll just close with the dua, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma wafiqna lima tuhibbuhu wa tarda, waj'alna min abidika su'ada, wa amitna ala kalimat al-huda, allimna ma yanfa'una wa wafiqna lil-amali bima 'allamtana bih, waj'al ma nahnu fihi khalisan mukhlisan liwajhika al-karim. آمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. O God, give us success to attain what you love and are pleased with. Make us amongst your felicitous servants. Allow us to die on the statement of guidance. Teach us what will benefit us and give us the success to act upon what you have taught us. Make that in which we are engaged pure and devoted to your noble face. Ameen, O Lord of the worlds. O God, make this gathering of ours a gathering enveloped in mercy, and our parting thereafter a parting of our sins purged and forgiven, not one of us wretched or deprived. And peace and blessings be upon our Master Muhammad and upon his noble family, companions, and followers. Ameen.